The door slammed behind her, locked, leaving Hana out in the freezing night, alone, heartbroken, abandoned. "You're a burden," Jihoon's voice echoed in her mind. "Get out." She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. How could he do this? Her world, shattered, lay in the silence around her. No one was coming. The cold bit deep into her skin, her fingers numb, her heart racing. Then, the screech of tires. A sleek black car stopped inches from her. The window rolled down, and a stranger's cold gaze met hers. "You're freezing out here," he said, voice low. "Get in." She should have run. But she didn't. She stepped inside. And as the door clicked shut, the question burned in her mind. "What do you want with me?" The sharp sting of the cold hit her like a slap to the face as Hana stumbled into the empty street, her breath a cloud of white in the frozen night air. Her heart pounded, not from the chill, but from the shock that still hadn't fully settled. How did it come to this? The door to their house slammed shut behind her, a finality to it that felt like a weight crushing her chest. It was only moments ago that her husband, Jihoon, the man she had married, the man she had trusted, had pushed her out. His words still echoed in her ears, cruel and final. "You're nothing but a burden, Hana. You've outlived your purpose. Get out." The door had barely closed before the heat of the argument, the tension, and the rawness of the betrayal flooded her mind, threatening to drown her. But there she was, her feet numb and her fingers stiff, her face streaked with the bitter taste of humiliation. The street was empty. The silence was deafening. No one came to her aid. The world moved on as if nothing had happened. Hana pulled her thin coat tighter around her, trying to stave off the cold that seemed to seep into her bones. The tears were frozen on her cheeks, and her heart, a heart she had once thought was unbreakable, was shattered into a million pieces. Just then, a sharp sound broke the silence. The screech of tires. A black car, sleek and menacing, came to a sudden stop beside her. The window rolled down, revealing a face she didn't recognize, sharp eyes, dark, calculating, and strangely sympathetic. "You're freezing out here, little girl. Get in," the man's voice rumbled from the warmth of the car. Hana hesitated, her mind still reeling from the events that had just unfolded. Why would someone want to help me? But then, the cold bit deeper, and her body, so numb, so drained, told her she had no choice. She slid into the car, shivering uncontrollably as the door clicked shut behind her. The man didn't speak again, only watched her with an expression that seemed to hold 1,000 unspoken words. As the car sped off into the night, Hana couldn't help but wonder, what is this man's game? She didn't know who he was or why he had appeared, but one thing was clear. Her life had just taken an unexpected turn. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because, tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. Hana had always been the kind of person who believed in the strength of family. She was born into a world of quiet love, where every holiday was spent with laughter around the dinner table and every hardship faced together. Her mother had taught her the importance of loyalty, and her father had shown her how to love unconditionally. The values she carried with her shaped her view of the world, until she married Jihoon. Jihoon had been a dream come true at first. He was charming, ambitious, and full of promises. When they met, Hana had just come out of a messy breakup that left her unsure of herself and what she wanted in a partner. Jihoon's affection had been a salve for her wounded heart, a beacon of hope in a world that suddenly felt too big and too empty. For the first few years of their marriage, it felt like a fairy tale. They had built a life together, her little shop downtown, cozy nights in their home, plans for the future. Hana had thought they were invincible, that nothing could break the bond they had. But that bond, she would soon learn, was fragile, cracked beneath the surface in ways she hadn't noticed before. The warning signs had been there for months. Jihoon had become distant, his temper had grown shorter, and his late nights at the office became more frequent. When Hana asked him about it, he would smile reassuringly, telling her everything was fine. He had always been a master of deflection. He knew how to make her question her own concerns, to doubt herself. But tonight, as she stood in the snow, kicked out of the home they had built together, all those little signs made sense. Jihoon had never truly loved her. She was a convenience to him, a role to play in his perfect life, until he grew bored. And now, she had been discarded like yesterday's trash. Her heart ached with the realization that her love had been nothing more than a fantasy. As the car sped down the road, Hannah's mind kept drifting back to the betrayal. She had built everything on the foundation of love. She had given him everything, her trust, her loyalty, her heart, and this was how it ended. How could she have been so blind? The man driving the car didn't speak a word. His presence was heavy, but it wasn't threatening. He simply seemed there. His eyes never left the road, and there was something unsettling about the way he seemed to know where to go. Hana couldn't help but wonder who he was. His dark clothes, the way he held himself, he was no ordinary man. She glanced at him, her curiosity rising. "Who are you?" The man finally turned his head toward her. His gaze was intense, as though he could see through her, to the very core of her being. "Does it matter?" he replied, his voice gravelly, yet calm. "What matters is that you're safe now." Hana swallowed the lump in her throat. "Safe? I don't even know where I am." The man gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, his eyes still focused on the road. "You're in the care of someone who can help. Someone who won't abandon you." The words hit her like a punch. She wasn't sure if she could trust him, but she was too exhausted to argue, too broken to refuse. Hana closed her eyes, trying to block out the tears threatening to spill. Her heart was in pieces, but there was a flicker of hope, faint, fragile, nestled deep within her. What had she been walking toward? What was waiting for her on the other side of this cold, empty world? Suddenly, her thoughts were interrupted by the sight of a towering mansion looming ahead. It looked like something out of a movie, elegant, intimidating, and almost surreal against the backdrop of the snowy landscape. The car pulled up to a wrought iron gate, and the man's hand moved to the side to press a button on the console. The gate creaked open slowly, and the car rolled forward, past manicured gardens and tall stone walls. "This is where you'll stay for now," he said, his voice steady, unbothered by the gravity of the situation. Hana didn't know what to say. She had no choice but to follow him inside. But as she stepped out of the car, she couldn't shake the feeling that this strange turn of events was just the beginning. As the door to the mansion closed behind her, the echoes of her past life seemed to fade into the distance. A new chapter was beginning, and Hana couldn't predict where it would lead. She only knew that she was no longer alone. Have you ever been in a situation where everything you believed in turned out to be a lie? What would you do if someone offered you a second chance, but you had no idea what their true intentions were? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Hana stood frozen for a moment in the entrance of the mansion, her eyes scanning the grand interior. The high ceilings were adorned with intricate chandeliers, and the cold marble floors gleamed beneath her feet. It felt like stepping into another world, one where she didn't belong, one that was too far removed from the life she had known. The man who had brought her here gestured for her to follow, his movements purposeful and silent. Hana had no choice but to walk in his wake, feeling small and out of place. She didn't know where she was going, but at this point, she wasn't in any position to ask questions. They passed through a long corridor lined with paintings, works of art that seemed as distant and cold as the mansion itself. The air was heavy with silence, and Hana's mind raced with thoughts of her husband, of the betrayal that had sent her running into the night. How did I end up here? The man stopped in front of a door and turned to face her. "This is your room for tonight. Rest. You'll need it." Hana nodded, though she didn't feel like resting. She felt like running, like screaming, like fighting for something she couldn't even name. But the exhaustion was too overwhelming. She stepped into the room, and the door closed softly behind her. She sank onto the bed, the weight of the world pressing down on her chest. Her body ached from the cold, but her heart ached even more. It felt like she was drowning in the aftermath of everything that had gone wrong. She had trusted Jihoon. She had given him everything, her love, her faith, her future. And now, she had nothing. For the first time in years, Hana allowed herself to break. She let the tears fall, her sobs muffled against the pillow. Her mind flashed to the moment Jihoon had thrown her out, his words cutting deeper than any physical blow. "You're a burden." Those words replayed over and over again, echoing in her ears like a haunting melody. How could he say that to her? How could he throw her away as if she meant nothing? But then, just as the sobs began to subside, there was a knock at the door. "Come in," Hana said, wiping her tears away quickly. The man from the car entered without waiting for an invitation. His eyes scanned the room briefly, assessing her state with the same detached air he had worn since they'd met. "I brought you something," he said, his voice as calm as ever. He handed her a small, square box wrapped in black paper. Hana took it from him, confused. "What is this?" she asked, her voice rough from crying. "Open it," he instructed, then turned to leave. She hesitated, her fingers trembling slightly as she untied the ribbon and peeled away the paper. Inside the box was a sleek, silver necklace with an intricate pendant, a dragon curled around a pearl, its eyes gleaming. Hana's fingers brushed over the cold metal, feeling a strange, inexplicable pull toward it. The door clicked shut behind her, and she was alone again. But this time, she couldn't shake the feeling that the necklace wasn't just an ordinary gift. There was something deeper about it, something that had been carefully chosen for a reason. And yet, she couldn't figure out why. Suddenly, there was a buzzing sound from the bedside table. Hana jumped, her heart racing as she reached for her phone. It was a message, an unknown number. She opened it, her breath catching in her throat as she read the words. "I know who you are, Hana. I know everything about you." Her hands went cold, her heart skipping a beat. "Who is this?" The next message came almost immediately. "Meet me tomorrow. I'll tell you everything." Hana felt a chill sweep through her as she stared at the screen. The message was simple, yet it carried a weight that made her uneasy. Who was behind this? Why would anyone want to meet her? She knew she should be cautious, should ignore it. But something inside her, perhaps the desperation, perhaps the need for answers, made her decide otherwise. She couldn't stay here forever, hiding from the life she had lost. The truth was out there, and it was calling her. The next morning, Hana woke with a start. The events of the previous night were a blur, but the sting of betrayal and the strange message still lingered in her mind. She couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, that her life had taken a turn she couldn't understand. After she dressed in the simple clothes the mansion's staff had left for her, Hana stood in front of the full-length mirror, staring at her reflection. She looked like a stranger to herself, her eyes were tired, her face pale, and her hair was tangled from the restless sleep she had barely managed. She was no longer the woman who had loved her husband with all her heart, she had been replaced by someone else, someone desperate, lost, and uncertain. What have I gotten myself into? The voice inside her head was the only thing keeping her grounded. And yet, it seemed to whisper more questions than answers. She could barely even remember the last time she had felt truly in control of her life. There was a knock at the door, and Hana's heart leapt in her chest. She quickly opened it to find the man from the night before standing there, holding a cup of steaming tea in his hand. "You need to drink this," he said, his tone still as detached as ever. It will help clear your mind. Hana hesitated before taking the cup. There was something about his presence that unsettled her, but at the same time, she felt a strange sense of safety in his quiet assurance. She couldn't explain it, but the part of her that felt broken needed to cling to whatever semblance of stability she could find. As she sipped the tea, the warmth spread through her, but her mind remained restless, her thoughts still tangled in the previous night's events. She needed answers. She needed to understand what was happening. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "What is all of this?" The man studied her for a long moment before answering, his eyes cold but not unkind. "My name is Kyung. I'm here because someone wants to help you." The words didn't make sense to her. "Help me? Who would want to help me? I don't even know who you are." Kyung placed his teacup on the table and walked toward the window, his back turned to her. "You don't know me, Hana. But I know you. And I know why you're here. You don't need to worry about your past. Not anymore." Hana felt a chill run down her spine. "Why? Why would you help me? After everything I've lost?" There was a long silence before he spoke again, his voice low. "Because the person you married isn't who you think he is. Jihoon is hiding something. And if you want to know what, you need to trust me." Hana's breath caught in her throat. "What are you talking about?" "My husband, he wouldn't." Kyung turned around then, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her heart race. "You're wrong. He's been playing a dangerous game, Hana. And you've been caught in the middle of it. The man you married is tied to people who are far more dangerous than you could ever imagine. The Korean Mafia." Hana stumbled backward, her mind reeling from the shock of his words. The Mafia? The thought was absurd. Her Jihoon, the man who had once sworn he would protect her, was involved in something so sinister? It didn't make sense. It couldn't be true. "You're lying," she whispered, her voice shaky. "You have to be." Kyung's face remained unreadable. "I'm not lying. I know who he is, Hana. And I know what he's done. But you're not the only one affected by his actions. There's a bigger picture here, one that's been unfolding for years. And you're at the center of it now." Her mind swirled with confusion and disbelief. She thought back to the life she had built with Jihoon, how everything seemed perfect, how he had always been the supportive husband, the loving partner. And now, in the span of a single night, it had all shattered, revealing a truth she wasn't ready to face. "I need time," Hana said, her voice breaking. "I need to think." Kyung didn't argue. Instead, he simply nodded, his gaze softening ever so slightly. "You'll have it. But time is something you don't have much of anymore. There are people who will come for you. And when they do, you need to be ready." Hana's pulse quickened as Kyung turned to leave. He paused at the door, his eyes meeting hers one last time. "Trust no one but yourself, Hana," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The truth is dangerous, and so are the people who know it." With that, he walked out, leaving Hana to process the bombshell he had just dropped. The truth about Jihoon, about the man she thought she knew, was too much to take in all at once. But deep down, Hana knew one thing for certain: her world had just flipped upside down, and there was no going back. What would you do if you found out the person closest to you wasn't who you thought they were? Could you face the truth if it meant losing everything? Share your thoughts below. I'd love to hear your perspective. The next few days felt like an endless blur. Hana tried to process everything Kyung had told her, but her mind was overwhelmed. The quiet, peaceful life she had once known was slipping through her fingers like sand. With every passing hour, she felt more lost, more untethered from the world she thought she understood. The walls of the mansion felt suffocating, the shadows too heavy. Kyung was a constant presence, always watching from a distance, never saying much, but always reminding her that time was running out. She found herself growing more suspicious of him, more aware of the quiet conversations he had with his colleagues. They were always in hushed tones, their words slipping past her like secrets she was never meant to hear. One evening, after a long, uncomfortable silence between them, Kyung took her aside. "We need to talk," he said, his voice tight, as if he were grappling with his own demons. "There's something you need to understand about Jihoon, about why he pushed you away." Hana's heart skipped. She had been waiting for an explanation, for something to make sense of the chaos in her life, but part of her was afraid of what she might learn. "Why did he throw me out, Kyung?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why now? After everything we've been through?" Kyung's expression was unreadable. He glanced at her, a flicker of something darker in his eyes. "It wasn't your fault. It's never been about you." Hana's stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" Kyung's hands clenched at his sides. "Jihoon's been involved in the mafia for years. He was trying to leave, trying to protect you from it. But when the mafia found out, they threatened to hurt you. To use you as leverage against him." Hana recoiled as though she had been slapped. "Hurt me?" She couldn't wrap her mind around the words. Jihoon, the man she had married, the man she thought she knew better than anyone, had been hiding a dangerous secret. And now, because of it, she was in the crossfire. "But why wouldn't he tell me? Why didn't he trust me?" she whispered, her voice shaky with a mixture of disbelief and hurt. Kyung's jaw tightened. "Because he didn't want to put you in the middle of it. He was trying to protect you, even if it meant keeping the truth from you." Hana's eyes welled up with tears, but she fought them back. "Protect me?" It felt like a cruel joke. If Jihoon had truly wanted to protect her, why would he kick her out? Why would he throw her into the cold, leaving her vulnerable to whatever came next? Her mind was spinning, her thoughts like a whirlwind. Was I just a pawn? Was our love just a lie, a carefully constructed facade to hide the truth? The weight of the revelation was suffocating. And just when Hana thought she had a grip on the situation, the rug was pulled out from under her again. Suddenly, the door to the room flew open, and Jihoon stood in the doorway, looking disheveled, his face pale, his eyes frantic. Hana's heart leapt in her chest. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. "Jihoon," she gasped, her voice breaking. "Hana, listen to me." His voice was raw, desperate, as though he had been running from something, or someone. "I never wanted this for you. I never wanted to hurt you. You have to believe me." Hana's head swam as she took a step back. She couldn't make sense of what was happening. One moment, Kyung was telling her that Jihoon had betrayed her, and the next, Jihoon himself was standing in front of her, begging for forgiveness. But as he stepped into the room, a movement behind him caught Hana's eye. A shadow loomed in the doorway, another man, tall and imposing, with a chillingly familiar face. It was one of Jihoon's associates, the kind of man Hana had only seen in passing at parties and events. His cold gaze landed on her, and her blood ran cold. Jihoon's eyes flickered to the man, then back to Hana, his face contorting in guilt and fear. "You don't understand," he said again, his voice cracking. "They're here. They've come for you." Suddenly, the weight of the entire situation crashed down on Hana. Her legs went weak, and she grabbed onto the edge of the desk to steady herself. "They've come for me." Before she could ask any more questions, the door slammed open behind her. Another man, dressed in black, stepped into the room. His face was a mask of cold calculation, his eyes scanning the room as though he was looking for something, or someone. And then, his gaze locked onto Hana. "Hana," he said, his voice low and smooth. "We need to talk. It's time for you to come with us." Hana's pulse raced as her mind struggled to make sense of the chaos. What was happening? She thought she had some semblance of control over the situation, but now everything was spiraling out of her reach. And the worst part? The worst part was that she still didn't know who to trust. Jihoon, Kyung, or this cold stranger standing in front of her. Was this all some twisted game? Or was she just a pawn being moved around by people who were playing with her life? The room felt smaller as the cold stranger's gaze bore into Hana. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest, the rhythm of panic speeding up with every passing second. Jihoon and Kyung stood in the background, both looking like they were on the edge of a cliff, ready to either leap or fall. Hana's mind was a mess. What's happening? It was as if the ground beneath her was collapsing, and she was being dragged down into a void of uncertainty. Everything she had thought she knew, everything she had believed in, had turned into a lie. Her marriage, her life, her safety, they all felt like fragile illusions now. Come with me, the stranger repeated, his voice colder than the air in the room. His words were calm, methodical, as though they had already made up their minds for her. You don't have a choice. We've been waiting for you. The blood drained from Hana's face. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. They're not just here to talk. They're here to take me. She took a step back, her legs shaking. No. I'm not going anywhere with you. Her voice trembled, but she forced herself to stand her ground. The stranger's lips twitched into a cold smile. You don't understand. You're already a part of something bigger than you. Running won't save you. Hana's eyes darted to Jihoon, desperate for some sign of hope. But what she saw on his face was worse than anything she had imagined. His expression was full of guilt, full of regret, but it was also full of fear. The same fear she had seen in Kyung's eyes when he'd warned her. The same fear that had gripped her when she realized her life was no longer her own. Hana, Jihoon said, his voice hoarse. Please. You have to listen to him. They'll kill you if you don't. Hana's heart twisted in her chest. Her mind screamed at her to run, to leave the mansion, to escape this nightmare. But where could she go? She was trapped in a world that had suddenly become a foreign and dangerous place. The tears threatened to spill as she looked between the three men. What do they want from me? It was Kyung who stepped forward then, breaking the suffocating silence. His face was grim, his hands clenched at his sides. You have to understand, Hana. What's happening right now is bigger than us. Bigger than you or Jihoon. Hana looked at him, her voice barely a whisper. Bigger than me? She asked, her throat closing in on itself. What does that mean? What do you want from me? Kyung hesitated, his gaze flickering between the stranger and Jihoon. Finally, he spoke. The Mafia isn't just after Jihoon. They're after you. The truth is, you're more involved in all of this than you realize. Her breath caught in her throat. Involved? What could I possibly be involved in? She felt as though she were drowning in a sea of questions with no answers, no shore to swim to. She couldn't trust anyone anymore. Kyung, Jihoon, this stranger, they all seemed to be playing their own game, and she was the pawn caught in the middle. Hana, Jihoon begged, his voice cracking with emotion. Please. They'll hurt you if you don't go with them. Just trust me. But trust was a luxury Hana couldn't afford anymore. Not after everything she had learned. She had trusted Jihoon, trusted him with her heart, and he had betrayed her. And Kyung. Was he really trying to protect her, or was he just another player in this twisted game? A new fear gripped Hana, something deeper than the fear of physical harm. It was the fear of being trapped in a world where she didn't know who to trust, where everyone had their own agenda, and where her own survival seemed less important than the schemes of men she had never asked to be involved with. Tears streamed down her face as the realization settled in, she had nothing. No one to turn to, no one to trust. Jihoon had abandoned her, Kyung was a mystery, and this man, this cold, calculating man, had come to take her away. The weight of it all pressed down on her, suffocating her. "I can't do this," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I can't." The cold man took a step forward, his eyes narrowing. "You don't have a choice. Your life has already been decided for you." With those words, Hana felt the last shred of hope slip away. She was no longer the woman who believed in love, in trust, in family. She was no longer the woman who could picture a future with Jihoon by her side. Now, all that was left was survival. But how could she survive in a world that was determined to tear her apart? And then, as though the universe had heard her silent cry, something shifted. A distant sound broke through the oppressive tension, the sound of a door crashing open, the sound of footsteps pounding in the hallway. Suddenly, everything changed. A familiar voice rang out from behind the cold man. "Hana, run!" It was Kyung. Before she could react, before she could even process what was happening, the door to the room burst open, and another figure stepped inside, another man. The man who had been following Jihoon. The man who had once been a shadow in the background of Hana's life. But now, he stepped into the light, his eyes wide with shock. His hand was raised, and he was pointing a gun straight at the cold man. The world around Hana seemed to slow, the chaos of the room fading into the background as the barrel of the gun was aimed squarely at the cold man's chest. For a brief moment, there was nothing but silence, the kind that fills the air just before a storm. Hana's pulse raced, her breath caught in her throat. "Is this it?" The stranger's gaze flickered from the gun to the man holding it, his lips curling into a thin, grim smile. But it wasn't one of victory. No, this was the smile of someone who had seen everything crumble and wasn't afraid of it. For the first time, Hana felt a shiver of fear run through her. The new man, her husband's ally, the one who had followed Jihoon, moved forward, his grip firm on the gun. "I won't ask again," he growled, his voice cold. "You need to leave. Now." The cold man held up his hands in mock surrender. "You don't want to do this, my friend," he said, his voice calm, as though this was just another game to him. "You're playing with fire." But Hana couldn't hear his words over the pounding of her heart. Everything was happening so quickly, her mind struggling to catch up with the reality that was unfolding before her. She had no idea who this new man was, why he was here, or what was happening in this tangled web of lies, betrayal, and danger. Her legs felt weak beneath her, but something inside her, something deep and buried, surged forward. It was the instinct to survive. To not let herself be swallowed by the darkness that had taken everything she knew. This is not how my story ends. She had been pushed down, cast aside by the man she loved, manipulated by forces she didn't understand. She had cried herself to sleep, lost in the weight of it all. But in that moment, staring at the two men who stood at opposite ends of her world, Hana realized something. She was no longer a pawn in anyone's game. Her chest rose and fell as her breath steadied, the fog of panic beginning to clear. She had been running from the truth, from the pain of what Jihoon had done, from the lies she had been told. But now, standing here, faced with the reality of her situation, she understood, she had a choice. Her thoughts drifted back to the necklace, the dragon pendant that Kyung had given her, the symbol of strength. The pendant had seemed like a mere trinket, a simple gift. But now, it felt like a promise. A reminder that she was capable of standing up for herself, of facing the truth, no matter how painful it was. With trembling hands, Hana reached for the necklace around her neck. The metal felt cold against her skin, but the strength it symbolized was starting to seep into her soul. "I'm not afraid anymore," she said quietly, more to herself than anyone else. Her words caught Jihoon's attention. He looked at her in shock, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Hana, please." "No," she interrupted, her voice firm for the first time in days. I'm done listening to lies. I'm done being a victim. She turned her gaze toward the cold man with the gun. And you both have tried to control me for too long. The man with the gun hesitated, but then he lowered it slightly, his expression unreadable. Hana's heart thundered in her chest, but she refused to back down. She had been through too much already. Who are you really? She asked the man. What is it you want from me? The man's lips curled into a smirk. We don't want anything from you, dear. We just need you to understand that you're a part of something much bigger than you realize. Your husband's little escape plan won't work. And neither will yours. Hana's eyes narrowed as she took a slow step forward. Then maybe I'll make my own plan. I'm not going to let you dictate my life anymore. The words felt foreign in her mouth, empowering, yet terrifying. She had spent so much time being afraid, being manipulated, but now there was a fire inside her. A fire she hadn't realized was there until now. As the cold man eyed her carefully, something in him seemed to shift. There was a brief flicker of doubt in his eyes, as though he hadn't expected this kind of resistance from her. Kyung, who had been silent throughout the standoff, finally spoke up. His voice was lower, almost tender. She's right, you know. You've underestimated her. Hana turned to Kyung, startled by his words. For the first time, she saw a glimmer of respect in his eyes, respect that she had never felt before, not from Jihoon, not from anyone. It was the kind of respect that came not from pity, but from true understanding. I'm done running, she whispered. There was a long pause as the three men watched her. Jihoon stepped closer, his expression torn. Hana, please. I know I've made mistakes, but we can figure this out. You can trust me. But Hana shook her head slowly. I can't trust anyone who has kept secrets from me. Not anymore. Her voice was steady now, and for the first time since everything had gone wrong, she felt a sense of clarity. She wasn't helpless anymore. She wasn't the woman who had been discarded in the snow. She wasn't a victim of the mafia, of Jihoon's betrayal, or of anyone else's control. Hana was her own person, and she would fight for her life, whatever it took. The cold man stepped back, his eyes darkening. This isn't over. Hana looked him dead in the eye. No. It's just beginning. With that, she turned to face Jihoon, her expression resolute. I'm not waiting for anyone to save me anymore. I'm saving myself. The tension in the room was so thick it felt like the air itself was holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable explosion. Hana stood in the center, her shoulders squared and her eyes locked on Jihoon, then the cold man, then Kyung. The weight of the situation wasn't lost on her, this was the moment that would decide everything. No more running. No more hiding. The room was suffused with an eerie stillness as she faced Jihoon. His face was pale, his eyes pleading, but there was something else, something darker, something she hadn't noticed before. I know you're angry, Jihoon said quietly, his voice rough. I deserve your anger. But you don't know everything, Hana. You don't know the truth about why I pushed you away. Hana's breath hitched, her heart pounding in her chest. She had heard enough of his half-hearted excuses, his apologies that felt empty and hollow. The love she had once felt for him had turned to ash, and she could no longer see the man she had married in front of her. He was just another player in this deadly game. I don't care about your excuses anymore, Jihoon, Hana said firmly, her voice steady, but her heart racing. I deserve the truth. All of it. Jihoon's face tightened as though the words physically hurt him. You were never meant to know, Hana. The Mafia, they would have killed you if I told you. I only wanted to keep you safe. Safe? Hana echoed bitterly. By throwing me out into the cold? By lying to me for years? The truth finally hit her, the coldness in his eyes, the way he had pulled away when she had needed him most. She had been a pawn in his attempt to protect himself, and now she could see him for what he truly was. Before she could speak again, the man with the gun, the one who had been following her, stepped forward. His cold eyes never left Hana as he said, "You're wasting your time. None of this matters anymore. We've already won." Hana's heart skipped a beat. There was a finality in his voice that chilled her to the bone. They had won? What did that mean? Kyung stepped forward, his hand resting on the gun at his side, his expression hardening. You haven't won yet. This ends now. Hana's pulse quickened. Everything felt like it was spiraling out of control, but she could feel that familiar fire inside her again, the same fire that had sparked when she had refused to back down before. She wasn't going to let these men control her any longer. This was her moment. The cold man smirked, sensing that the situation was far from over. You think you can stop this? You have no idea what you're up against, Kyung. No idea. Kyung's gaze was cold, unwavering. You underestimate me. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a file, thick, sealed, and covered in a stamp of the Korean Mafia's insignia. The file dropped onto the table with a heavy thud. Hana's breath caught in her throat as she realized the full weight of what was happening. Kyung was holding something they all needed. And in that moment, everything clicked into place. The Mafia had been after Jihoon, because of something he had been hiding. Something that had been passed down through generations. This was bigger than just betrayal. This was about legacy, power, and survival. And now Hana had been dragged into it, too. Open it, Kyung said coldly, his voice filled with authority. Hana's hands trembled as she approached the file, feeling the eyes of the men on her. She hesitated before she peeled open the seal. The pages inside were filled with names, dates, and blacked-out sections. But one name stood out above the rest. Her name. Her heart stopped as she read the words aloud, her voice barely above a whisper, Hana. Lee. Heir to the Han clan? She looked up at Kyung, confusion clouding her features. What does this mean? Kyung stepped closer, his face grim. The Han clan, Hana. Your family. They were the leaders of a rival syndicate, decades ago. The Mafia thought they had wiped out your family, but they didn't know one thing, you were alive. And now they want you back. The pieces of the puzzle were finally falling into place. The reason Jihoon had kept her in the dark. The reason he had been so desperate to protect her. She wasn't just a wife. She wasn't just a victim of a broken marriage. Hana was the daughter of a powerful crime family, a family she had never known about, a family whose enemies were now after her. Jihoon had tried to protect her by keeping her away from the truth. But in doing so, he had only dragged her deeper into the web of danger. Tears blurred Hana's vision as she looked at him, betrayal and hurt written all over her face. Why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me live in this lie? Jihoon's eyes filled with regret, his voice cracking as he stepped closer. I never wanted this for you. I never wanted you to be a part of this world. But it's too late, Hana. You've been marked. They will come for you. You have no choice but to go with them. No, Hana said, shaking her head slowly. I won't be a part of this. She stood taller now, no longer the woman who had been cast aside. Her voice, steady and firm, rang through the room. I'm not running from the past anymore. I'm taking control of my future. Kyung's eyes flashed with a hint of approval as he nodded. This isn't over. But it's your fight now, Hana. You can decide how it ends. As the tension in the room reached its peak, the cold man lunged forward, aiming a gun at her. But in a flash, Kyung was there, disarming him with brutal efficiency, pinning him to the floor in a move so fast that Hana couldn't even react. The man groaned, his weapon sliding out of his reach. Hana's breath caught in her throat as the danger passed, her body still shaking from the intensity of the moment. But she wasn't afraid anymore. She had faced the truth, and now it was time to stand up for herself. The path ahead was unclear, but Hana knew one thing for sure: she would not be a pawn in this dangerous game any longer. The days following the confrontation felt like a whirlwind, a blur of decisions, revelations, and new alliances. Hana's life had been completely upended. The woman who had once been a quiet, content wife, living in the comfort of her own world, was now thrust into the chaos of a world she never knew existed. But with the chaos came clarity. She understood now what she had to do. No more running. No more letting others dictate her life. The truth had been revealed: her family's legacy, her ties to the Mafia, Jihoon's secrets, and now, it was her choice to decide how it all unfolded. Kyung had become an unlikely ally in her quest for answers, offering information and support, but never once pushing her into decisions she wasn't ready to make. He had made it clear that her survival, her power, her future, were hers to claim. Jihoon, on the other hand, had disappeared. After the confrontation, after the bombshell of her family's connections to the Mafia, he had left her with one final message, a plea to return, to forget it all, to live a life free from the violence that had marked both of their pasts. But Hana knew she couldn't go back to that life. She couldn't go back to the lies, the deception, the false sense of safety he had created. She wasn't the same person who had married Jihoon. The woman she was now was stronger, more aware of her own worth. The truth, no matter how painful, had set her free. It wasn't long before Hana took the reins of her own life. She reached out to the right people, the ones who could help her fight against the remnants of her family's legacy, the ones who could protect her and those she cared about. It wasn't going to be easy. The Mafia wasn't just going to let her go. But she had something they didn't. She had the truth on her side. She had herself. Kyung remained by her side throughout it all, not as a protector, but as a partner. He wasn't interested in controlling her, like the men who had come before him. He simply wanted her to succeed. They made a formidable team, working together to uncover the deeper layers of the family's secrets and to take down those who still lurked in the shadows, hoping to exploit her. As the months passed, Hana grew stronger, physically, emotionally, and mentally. She no longer ran from the past. Instead, she used it to fuel her drive for the future. She began to rebuild, not just her life, but her sense of identity. She learned that her worth wasn't defined by her past, her family, or the men who had tried to use her. Then, one evening, while overlooking the city from a quiet rooftop, Hana found herself in a place of unexpected peace. The chaos had subsided, the danger had been dealt with, and the weight of her decisions finally felt lighter. Kyung stood beside her, offering her a smile, a rare, genuine one. He had been by her side from the beginning, never asking for anything in return, simply giving her the space she needed to find herself. "Do you think they'll ever stop coming after me?" Hana asked, her voice soft, but strong. Kyung's eyes met hers, unwavering. "No. They never stop, not really. But you're not the same person who first walked into this mess. You're stronger than any of them, Hana. And you'll always have the choice to fight back." Hana smiled, a real, unburdened smile. "I'll keep fighting." And with that, for the first time in a long while, Hana felt whole. She had faced the darkest parts of her past and had come out stronger on the other side. The journey wasn't over, there were still battles ahead, still enemies to face, but she wasn't afraid anymore. She had taken control of her destiny, and it was hers to shape. She looked at Kyung, her ally, her friend, and a warmth spread through her. The future was uncertain, but it was hers to navigate. "Thank you," she whispered, knowing that this wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about living, on her terms. Kyung gave a nod, a quiet acknowledgement of their shared journey. They stood side by side, ready to face whatever came next. Together, thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's just as crazy and intriguing as this one, so don't miss out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.